again, and I'm going to introduce first our main speaker for the day who will be presenting. That's André Leu. He is the co-founder and international director of Regeneration International, and he does a lot outside of that. He has over 50 years of experience with regenerative farming, regenerative agriculture, which we'll talk about today what that means. It means a lot of different methods, such as permaculture and rotational grazing, cover crops. A lot of different things are under that umbrella. So we will get more into that today. But André Leu is also a published author. He has written 4 books on this topic, and he is right now an adjunct professor at South Seas University. So he has lots of experience working with different farmers, different groups all over the world. And he also works with United Nations and institutions and governments. So we really have an expert on our hands. So just thank you so much, André, for being here today and sharing all that knowledge with us. And I'll also introduce Flo, but just so you all know the flow of the event, um, André will be presenting, he'll be sharing slides, whereas Flo is going to be more of a kind of commentator and just adding on how all of this relates to what we do at Sustainable Harvest International. So when I say main speaker, I am not saying that Flo is any less of a speaker, but she will just be not sharing slides or doing as much of a presentation. But without further ado, Flo Florence Reed, and like I just mentioned, her nickname is Flo, so we call her that a lot at SHI. She is the founder and director of strategic growth at Sustainable Harvest International. And she started this organization after she volunteered with the Peace Corps in the 90s. And from there, she has worked with also farmers, donors, people from all over the world as well, just like André. But she has focused a lot in Central America because that is where she went with the Peace Corps. And that is where our programs are currently in Belize, Honduras, and Panama. That's where we are currently. We at once also worked in Nicaragua. So Flo also has a lot of experience speaking. She has a TED Talk called Salvation is in the Soil. And she also has a lot of experience in just expanding and spreading the word on regenerative agriculture. For example, we'll talk about at the end how she's doing that through a film. So Flo is just spreading the word, the same as André. And so we really have 2 amazing people who are dedicated to this work on our hands. With that said, I'm just thank you again for coming today, for wanting to learn from them. I personally have learned a lot from both of them, so I'm excited to see what they have for us today. And yeah, André, I think that's your call. Are you ready to take it away?
Okay, so I just want to say good evening to everyone and buenas tardes a todos. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this webinar. I'm a great admirer of Sustainable Harvest International, what you're doing. For me, I get to see a lot of these programs around the world, and I regard what you guys do is amongst the best of any program. It's a pleasure to be part of your webinar. So I'll share my screen and start. So we've titled this Farming for the Future, and I just want to introduce who we are. It's Regeneration International, and we are the organization who started the global regeneration movement. And our vision is a big picture. It's a healthy global ecosystem in which practitioners of regenerative agriculture, land use in concert with consumers, educators, business leaders, policymakers, cool the planet, feed the world, restore public health and prosperity and peace on a global scale. We started our initial steering committee in 2014, and we launched Regeneration International at a big meeting in Costa Rica in 2015. And it's very important because very few people have heard about it before we formed Regeneration International. And now regenerative agriculture is in the news every day. And it's because it was a handful of us that came from different movements: the organic movement, agroecology, holistic management, environment, and natural health. And we did launch it. The original steering committee was Dr. Vandana Shiva, Ronnie Cummings, Dr. Hans Heron, Steve Rye, and myself. What it was really important the way we did it. We brought around 200 people from all over the world to Costa Rica. And Ronnie Cummings, the late Ronnie Cummings, raised several $100,000 to ensure that people from the global south could afford to come to Costa Rica. Yeah, thanks. So we were very inclusive. And out of that meeting, people went back to their countries and they started forming regenerative organizations, making films, videos, and regeneration became you could say, a global phenomena, and it is still growing. Currently, we are 575 partners in 76 countries on every arable continent. The reason why we did this is because industrial agriculture has to change. And we chose the word regenerative as a simple neutral mean to engage farmers and other stakeholders in a paradigm change. Most stakeholders see the need to regenerate agriculture. And consequently, it has regenerated, so it has resonated with stakeholders around the world. It continues to resonate. A lot of people say there's no definition. We put out our definition right in the beginning, and it's a broad definition. Now, there are other ones that fit within ours, and we're quite happy for these resilient, what we call equivalent definitions to be out there. They don't contradict ours, but I'd like to show you our definition. Regenerative systems improve the environment, soil, plants, animal welfare, health, and communities. And this is the really important point that we want to put out. The opposite of regenerative is degenerative. And this is an essential distinction in determining practices that are not regenerative. Agricultural systems that use degenerative practices and inputs that damage the environment, soil, health, genes, communities, and involve animal cruelty are not regenerative. So, we would say the current use of synthetic toxic pesticides, water-soluble fertilizers, these are all causing health and environmental problems. Genetically modified organisms are damaging the genome, the basics of all life on the planet. Confined animal feeding operations are incredibly cruel. Where we have exploitative marketing or wage systems, destructive tillage, clearing of high-value ecosystems, these are degenerative practices. So, so these sort of systems should be called degenerative agriculture to stop greenwashing and hijacking. It's very, very simple. If somebody is doing something that is degenerative, by definition, they cannot be regenerative. To help people make this decision on what is regenerative and what is degenerative, the 4 principles of organic agriculture are really a simple way to do it. It's much simpler than all the different principles and criteria, say, for agroecology, which are quite complex and most farmers get turned off. We've got health, ecology, fairness, and care. And if we analyze any practice or input by these, we can easily decide, is it regenerative or is it degenerative? Does it regenerate the environment and health, or does it degenerate? So I'd advise everybody to take time to read this, because this makes it very, very simple for us to make the decisions. What we've seen since we've started this movement, 9 years ago, is we see the emphasis on soil health. increasing soil organic matter, removing greenhouse gases, regenerating agroecosystems, increasing on-farm biodiversity, reducing and eliminating synthetic pesticides and chemical fertilizers. We're increasing yields. We're ensuring there's fairness in marketing and production. In other words, we don't let the coyotes control the markets. And we have social empowerment and justice. And these are significant changes, and we're benefiting agriculture, the environment, and communities. Now I want to talk about the whole basis of regenerative agriculture. And it's about growing plants, and it's about the most important, event that happened on our planet a few billion years ago when we got photosynthesis. And what happened first in microorganisms, that later in plant leaves, is that they use the energy from the sun to take carbon dioxide, which is our main greenhouse gas, and combine it with water, and they make glucose. And glucose is the basis of the food system for most life. You know, the energy that we get comes from glucose, and that's because and all that glucose has come from photosynthesis. Either we've eaten plants, got it directly from plants, or we have eaten animals that have eaten plants. But all that energy that powers us and virtually every other living organism on this planet comes from photosynthesis. And what is really important here is that 95 to 98% of a plant's body comes from this process. And this is actually ignored in industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture talks about what we call the 5% that comes from the soil that makes up the plant, the minerals in the soil. And that's what they're concentrating on fertilizing. That is important, but they're ignoring the 95%. They've got what we'd say in farming, the cart before the horse. They've got things the wrong way around. Just to explain this is that glucose is the basic molecule of life. All the other molecules that we use to be living comes from glucose. So it's the first sugar, and then all these other sugars are made from it. Then the carbohydrates we eat come from glucose. You know, we talk about maize or rice, wheat, potatoes, sweet potatoes. Those carbohydrates are made from glucose, and then they can be modified and turned into hydrocarbons, and that's the oils and fats that we have. And then they can add nitrogen, sometimes sulfur, and make amino acids. Now, amino acids are the basis of our DNA, our proteins, our hormones, our saliva, our skin, our muscles. All that comes from this one little molecule. It's really important. Now, I talked about 95 to 98% of a plant comes from glucose, because wood, cellulose, is made from long chains of glucose and water. Basically, nearly everything on this planet comes from this one molecule. It's the most important molecule, and yet when we talk about agriculture, it's ignored. This is the 95% that they forget about, but it is the basis of our system. And the reason why is it's very important that when plants grow, about 30% of these compounds they make, these molecules of life, they goes from the leaves and they exudate them. They feed them out of their roots to the soil microbiome. And we have a word for this. It's called the carbon pathway, liquid carbon pathway, or the carbon gift. There's different names for it, but where it is really important is it feeds the largest area of biodiversity on the planet. We call it the rhizosphere. And that's where all the microorganisms live around roots. And what you can see here, here's a root tip. And you can see these exudates, these molecules of life made from glucose, coming out of the roots. And the plants are doing that to feed the soil microbiome. And it is the area of the highest biodiversity on the planet. 1 teaspoon contains billions of organisms. You know, it's a bit like saying you've got the amount of the equivalent of all the trees in the Amazon in a few teaspoons of soil. That's how, to put it into perspective, how important this is. In a healthy ecosystem, a lot of our farming systems, because we're poisoning the soil and killing it, instead of having billions, you've got hundreds, the biological deserts. The rhizosphere, this is an example of the root under a microscope. It's cross-section. And you can see here, these are fungi. And what they are doing is they are getting glucose directly from the root, because they can't photosynthesize. And these aren't parasites. I'll explain their role in the next slide. But what we're seeing all around here is how soil forms. These microorganisms build the soil. See this nice crumb structure? This is what we want to look for in the soil. We call them PEDs. It keeps it open. It allows air to go in there. It allows water to go in there. The air is 78% nitrogen. These microorganisms can get that nitrogen and feed that to the plant, so we don't have to use nitrogen fertilizers, for instance. But what you see there is how the roots, in combination with all these microorganisms, build soil and soil fertility. And this is an example. You saw the fungi, the mycelium coming out of the roots. And this is an example of a little pine tree and how plants work in symbiosis with these organisms. These aren't parasites. The fungi, it can't photosynthesize. It needs glucose just like us. So instead of killing its host to steal it, what it's doing is feeding its host. It goes deep down. Just to explain here, here's our host. It's photosynthesizing. It's making these organisms. And all these nodes here is where it's feeding glucose to its host. This is its root system, the plant's root system. Now look at what the fungi is doing. It's extending the roots out to equivalents of miles. If you extend these, imagine this is 3-dimensional. It's going deep down. It's getting water for its host. It's making compounds like phosphorus that are locked up. It's unlocking them and it's feeding its host plant. So in exchange for glucose, this organism is building the soil, unlocking all these locked up nutrients and feeds its host plant. The more it feeds its host plant, the more the host plant grows and photosynthesizes, the more glucose it makes, the more that the fungi gets the glucose, the more it grows. So it's beneficial to both of them. And the word we have for this is synergy. And synergy is where the combination of benefits is greater than so the actual benefits are greater than the combination. Best way to say it is, instead of 1 and 1 equaling 2, over time, 1 and 1 equals 3, 4, 5. 1 and 1 starts to equal thousands in synergy. And what I want to say is this is how nature works, mostly by symbiosis and synergy. And this idea of the Darwinian notion of survival of the fittest, that nature is competition, which is what dominates our agriculture, is wrong. Yes, there is competition and we can manage it. But more importantly is to realize this cooperation and working together is the basis of how ecosystems work. If competition of the fittest was right. Over time, in any ecosystem, there'd only be one species, the fittest. Everything else would go. But we know in any ecosystem, over time, we get more and more species because species cooperate. And we need to take this knowledge and apply it to our farming systems. So this is my farm at the end of the rainy season. And I live in a climate in Australia that is exactly the same as Belize, Honduras, Costa Rica. I'm 16 degrees south of the equator. You guys are the equivalent north, and it's a monsoonal climate with a wet season, and I grow tropical fruits. Now, I put my tractor in there to see what my farm looks like at the end of the wet season. My neighbours think I'm the worst farmer in the district because I've let my farm go to rack and ruin. I'll let all the weeds take over. That's what they think. This is a cover crop. And what we're doing now is I'm using all the water from the monsoon, not wasting it. I'm using all the sunlight to do photosynthesis. This is all glucose in the molecules of life. And while it's growing, 30% of all that is going into my soil and making it deeper. This is how I build soil fertility. Now, I don't leave it like this. My cover crop, I'll either graze down with cattle. In other parts, I take my tractor and slasher it and just cut it down. And I just want to explain what is happening here, because when I go and either graze it down or cut it down, plants feed from their leaves to feed their roots. To start, what I wanted to start with those first pictures is to explain that because 95 to 98% of a plant does not come from fertilizers. It comes from carbon dioxide, water, and solar energy. So this is the really important issue here. This is the 95% of the plant is made here. If we cut the leaves, we are reducing the amount of glucose and molecules of life. The plant has to shed its roots. The more we cut, the more roots that are shed. So if you imagine my place where I've got a lot of leaves and it's higher than my tractor, I cut it down in the dry season, all those roots have shed down and now are breaking down into the soil and feeding the soil. But not only that, while this was growing, it was also putting in all the molecules of life. So the correct management builds soil fertility. This is really important to remember. It's less than 5% of this comes from the soil. That is still important. Don't get me wrong, getting the mineral deficiencies corrected is important. But what I find is amazing is that is all that is talked about. And we forget about the 95 to 98%. So this is my place in the dry season after I've cut down the cover crop. And when I started, I had very poor soils, like I've seen in a lot of areas in Central America and Mexico. I had less than 1%. I had a very low pH, very acidic. In 11 years, I went up to 6% organic matter instead of less than 1%. And I increased the pH from 4.5 to 6.5, which is a really nice, just slightly acidic soil, just perfect. And I increased all my nutrients. Now, I did bring some of them on, but virtually most of this I've grown by growing plants, and the plants have fed the microorganisms in the soil who have released all these minerals. Didn't have to buy it. What I wanted to show you here, this is a legume root. You can see the exudates. So what's happening in my soil now, every year it's getting deeper. It's reached a good level here between 6 and actually some of these is 9%. So I say an average of 6%, but over time, my soils are getting deeper and better as the roots go deeper and they put more carbon in, and also because this is a legume, put nitrogen in as well. So to give you examples now how we can rethink agriculture instead of this survival of the fittest and anything that is not our crop, we have to kill as weeds. That's the way we've done it. We can start rethinking how to maximize capturing solar energy. So this is one of the ways we're doing it in Australia now. We call it pasture cropping, and we can use it with rice, we can use it with maize, we can use it with anything. Here it's oats. And here the pasture is grazed down very, very short. Remember, you saw the picture before. If we graze or cut down the cover crop, we'll call the pasture a cover crop, it sheds all its roots, and then strip till into it the crop. And in this case, he gets the same yield of oats as his neighbors without all the fertilizers, without all the cost of plowing up and spraying herbicides. Plus, when he takes the oats off, he puts his animals back on pasture. He gets a second crop on the same pasture. In the beginning, he put a little bit of phosphate on just to stimulate it, because Australian soils, like a lot of soils, are low in phosphate. But since then, he doesn't put anything on. And this is to show you what happens over time.
Andre,
This is,
do you want to do like your last 1 or 2 points just so we can get to flow?
okay. Just let me just go a little bit further, and then I'll let me finish this. And
Sure,
then
just wrap up. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to show you this as a comparison. This is by Christine Jones. And this used to be the same farm. Two brothers owned it. And one is with just standard industrial agriculture. So there's a little bit of organic matter. Here, what you can see is that over time, the soil deepens. Organic matter goes in there. And while it's going there, it's feeding the soil microbiome. So if you have a look here, he's increased the amount of minerals. Instead of buying all this, he didn't buy any of this. Like I said, he just put a bit of phosphorus on in the beginning. But all this has come through using the biology. And I suppose what I'm really trying to get across here is, instead of being captured by the agrochemical companies and feeling that you've got to spend a fortune on buying fertilizers, here we can use the natural biology to build the fertility and get good yields. And lastly, I'll just end on this slide and hand it over to Flo. So this is an example where it's improved, where the pasture gets mulched down or grazed down and strip tilling into it, and then putting the cover crop into it. This is a case, he uses this cover crop for his livestock, and he's more than doubled his production by doing this. But what I wanted to say here, he's actually been paid for by the Australian government for increasing soil organic matter. And if these systems were extrapolated, that'd be 63 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. And at the moment, we're putting up 28 billion tons. So what I want to say, if we can scale these systems up, we do better than net zero. We actually go negative. We can reverse climate change. So anyway, I'll hand it over to Flo now.
That is
Thanks,
a great
Andre.
final comment. Thank you so much, Andre. And yes, Flo, I know you just want to, bring that back to how that relates to what we do at Sustainable Harvest International. If you have any other comments you want to add, go for it.
I could have listened to Andre all evening, but glad to have the opportunity to start a conversation, and hope that others will join in on the conversation. as well. But first, I have to say that I can't say how gratifying it is for me to hear Andre say that he believes sustainable harvest programs is one of the best out there for spreading this type of agriculture. As obviously he is so knowledgeable about this. And Andre, I just wondered if you could maybe just say a little more about what it is about Sustainable Harvests program that you see as being particularly valuable, and maybe how we might try to spread more of those values around the world.
Well, for me, it's a long-term commitment to stay with the farmers and make sure they're successful. I get to see a lot of these programs. Most of them are based on a 3-year funding cycle. They're done by NGOs who really don't know that much. And it's sort of like a job, and they go in and they meet with the communities and they put all these expectations, and they put their program in place and get it happening. And then end of 3 years, they leave. They write a very nice report that goes to the funders. It says how good it is. But from my experience, and if you do a follow-up a year later or 2 years later, there's nothing. Everything's back to the way it was, because it's just too, one, it wasn't practical. It's just too difficult. People just, the funding stopped. That was the main incentive for people to do it. So they go back to the way things are, and it all falls apart. And I'll look at that and I go, it's just been a waste of everybody's time and money. Whereas, I have seen your programs. I'm a ground truther, and, that they do change people's and communities' lives. And that to me is what is really important. It's, for me, outcome based and looking at outcomes, ground truthing. So that's why I think your model is amongst the best I've seen anywhere in the world.
Oh, thanks, Andre. I really appreciate that. And I particularly loved what you said about how nature is not primarily about competition, that it's about cooperation. And so I'm so happy that this webinar is an opportunity for Sustainable Harvest to collaborate with Regeneration International. Of course, Sustainable Harvest's work is focused on collaborating with farmers and bringing them together with professional trainers. Regeneration International brings together all sorts of different people working in the regenerative agriculture field. And I mean, you covered this somewhat in your presentation, but I wondered if you might just say a bit more about what is that common thread in the regenerative agriculture movement. I've heard some farmers who I respect a lot express skepticism about it because they feel like it might pull people away from organic. It might excuse farming practices that aren't as good for the environment in some way because maybe it's not organic. And so I just wondered if you could say a little more about that.
Yeah, look, that's a very good question, because ironically, the only pushback we get is from the organic sector to see us as a threat. And it's a stupid, idiotic thing from their part. Now, I was the international president of the organic movement at the time. IFARM Organics, when we formed it. Ronnie Cummings, Organic Consumers Association, Vandana Shiva, we're organic people. And we did it because we actually want to see a paradigm shift. And I want to say we want to see a paradigm shift in organic as well. So we chose the word organic, regenerative, because what we wanted to do is get a paradigm shift in industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture at the moment is an existential threat to to all of us. 80% of the loss of forests due to industrial agriculture. We're seeing all these ecosystems being destroyed because of the fertilizers and pesticides. Bird numbers have crashed, for instance, in the USA. Why? Because insect numbers have crashed because of pesticides. Birds eat insects, amphibians, and so on. You see this whole flow on through the ecosystem because industrial agriculture is survival of the fittest, the Darwinian notion of conquering nature and destroying it. And then on the other side, we've got all the health problems. Industrial agriculture impoverishes farmers because farmers get into debt because they've got to pay for all these fertilizers that they think they need for fertility. They pay for pesticides and so on. The killer for farmers, and why most farmers are walking off their farms, is that they're in debt now. And then the marketing systems with all the coyotes out there exploiting people. So this system needs to change. And what we sort of, if you just, so for a long time, you fight against it, but it doesn't really work. So what we wanted to do is find a paradigm shift that made it easy for people to change. So by saying that we want to regenerate agriculture, farmers get it. The majority of farmers are very unhappy. We've got a farming diaspora around the world. It doesn't matter whether you're in the Midwest of the USA or in Central America or Africa, Middle East, India, wherever you know it. People are walking off their farms, and they're walking off their farms mostly because of debt. So that, by choosing this neutral mean, people get it and they want to regenerate. So getting that change is really important. The other thing that is really important then is we're the ones who have guided that change, so it's nature-based and soil-based. And we brought soil to the forefront. No one really talked about soil until we did it. Soil organic matter, soil health. We brought climate change into it. And you start to get a paradigm shift. And it's the biggest agricultural revolution in our lifetimes. I'm at the coalface here, and I know what's happening. And we're getting so many farmers changing. Now, this isn't a threat to organic. We're not taking farmers from organic. We're getting farmers moving closer to organic so that at some point the gap is a lot smaller and it's a lot easier for them if they choose to go organic. And the organic movement actually needs to realize this is their biggest opportunity. Instead of being negative, they should embrace it and work with us to shape the pathway.
Thanks, Andre. I think that fits perfectly with Sustainable Harvest's philosophy, where we work with the farmers and we don't tell them that they can or cannot do something. We offer them a menu of new practices that they can use that build up soil health, that increase biodiversity, and that allow them to produce more to feed their families, to increase their income, and to be doing it in a way that's helping to stabilize the climate and increase biodiversity and make a better life for their families, and make farming a viable and even an attractive option for people. I'm feeling conscious of time. I don't know, Tanya, whether you'd like me to do one more question with Andre, or do we want to open?
Sure, we have only received 3 questions, so I think we can do one more question from you, Flo, and then we'll get into those 3 questions. And if anyone else has a question, go ahead and put it in the chat.
Okay, well, I appreciate having the opportunity for one more question. So Andre, you spoke quite a bit about the existential threat of industrial agriculture, which I obviously could not agree with more. But I wonder, when thinking about the alternatives to industrial agriculture, how you see the potential for implementing those alternatives on the large scale farms, as compared to on the 500 million small scale smallholder farms around
Okay,
the world,
so
and maybe just a little bit about those differences.
yeah, okay. Look, they both work. Actually, I actually had one example of a very good small scale farm, and the one is Singing Frogs Farm in California. Now, they farm on 3 acres. They use a no-till system instead of tilling or spraying out. They have raised beds of compost and mulch to smother weeds and plant into it. Now that is an incredibly productive farm. They employ 8 people. They earn, I think they're earning around $200,000 an acre out of it. And, and also, when I did the massive amount of carbon dioxide they drew out, it's incredible. If we scaled that up, we can, it's 179 billion tons a year. And you think the majority, majority of the world's farmers, over 500 million families, have 2 acres or less. And this is a model that could easily be scaled up and turn these farms into incredibly productive farms, feed everyone, earn good income, good employment for the community, money through the community. You think about all the flow-on effects. If we just get it's not big money, and start scaling up these systems. And the other thing I just want to say is that these are the farmers that are, basically at the front of the migration crisis. And most people, they want to live in their communities. That's where their family, their history, everything is, And if we can give them a really good standard of living, make their communities viable, we change it. And I know where we've done it, and I'll say in this case, when I was an iFarm, when we started to do it, guess what? We reversed the migrant, the whole diaspora. Kids start coming back. They want to be with their family, and they've actually got a good future. They've got work, that housing, this wonderful well-being. This is where I think we're using money wrong. We've got the billions being wasted in all the wrong ways, and it's just generating all these social problems and hate and all these other things. We could get this money, and those 500 million farmers could be some of the most happy people, well-being, good life, good health, and everybody is better off, and at a fraction of the cost of what we're wasting.
Absolutely. I've actually done the calculations, and even though Sustainable Harvest program is intensive multi-year program, some people suggest we spend too much because per farm, because it is multi-year and intensive program. But I calculated that with 5% of what governments now spend on agriculture, a program like ours could reach all 500 million of those smallholder farms. So I just feel like there's no excuse for it. Sustainable Harvest does have a scaling plan aiming towards 1 million farms to play our part in leading the way towards that global transformation. And I think Tanya mentioned, we'll probably mention it later, that we have a film coming out soon that will, I hope, encapsulate that really, really well in a short 30-minute documentary. But I should probably turn things back over to Tanya, so that other people have a chance to ask their questions.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment, Flo. That's why we're really supportive, and I just think that we should be looking at how we can get that money so you can get that million. Well, we've got to get 500 million.
Yes.
The money's there.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Andre. All right, Tanya.
Yes, thank you both. And we do have another question. So yes, let's get right into it. And then I'll just close this out. We're already towards the end. The first question is for Andre, but Flo, if you have any other comments, feel free to add in afterwards. For Andre from Fausto, could you elaborate more about greenwashing and how to deal with this issue? Most of the leaders of the food industry now claim their contribution in regenerative agriculture. What do you think about greenwashing, Andre?
Okay, look, we always knew we'd have greenwashing. You know, happened with the concept of sustainable agriculture. I mean, Monsanto became the world's biggest, sustainable agriculture company. You know, you could see that it sort of lost its original meaning. And we knew that once we became successful, they will do the same. They hijack, organic as well. There's issues we're having. That's what they do, or they try to do. So that's why right in the beginning it was very important for us to say that the opposite of regenerative is degenerative. So they can use the word however they want. We call them out for being degenerative. But at the other side of it, I just want to say it's sort of like people like in the organic sector that are actually making this really big deal out of it without actually going in and seeing what these companies are doing. And I'm at the coal front, and it's not all bad. We all call them out for where they're doing degenerative. There's only a couple, Bayer, for instance, Syngenta, they're trying to push their GMO, herbicide sprayed toxic agriculture and call it regenerative. In other words, they're greenwashing, no change in practice. That's actually very small. And what I want to say here is that this is actually, regenerative agriculture is a farmer-led revolution. It hasn't been led by big business. They're tinkering around the edges. But I'm the person who's on every continent every year talking with farmers. And I am a farmer. This is my farm at the back, organic tropical fruits. And, I can say that it's us as farmers who are leading it, doing the innovation, groups of farmers getting together. There's very few academics, and a lot of the stuff written by academics is absolute crap. I can say that because I've got a doctorate of science. I've written enough scientific papers, and I will be very critical of what they're putting out. There's very few government bureaucrats at this stage, and we deliberately avoided them and made this a farmer revolution. Now, the fact that some of the companies like General Mills and others took it up, their programs aren't that bad, and I'm actually had time advising their regenerative people, and they're actually very good people, and they're working with this paradigm shift. So we're seeing them going from industrial agriculture now and bringing in soil health, bringing in cover crops, reducing agrochemicals. That's a positive. That's where we want agriculture to go. We can't expect every farmer to be organic tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. A lot of farmers won't do it, but we get them on the pathway. And when we look at some of the better companies doing this and their programs, we're very happy with it. Plus, it gets out the word in the mainstream media where normally we don't get. And that's been the big change. So basically, it's not all, how can you say, the companies are behind it. Most of them are good. There's a couple of them that are really bad. But actually, what I wanted to say, as farmers in it, farmers aren't stupid. and most of these farmers who know that Bayer and Bayer Monsanto, same company, and Syngenta are bullshitting, full of crap, and they know that no-till GMOs aren't regenerative. They're not being fooled, and maybe a small handful. Majority of farmers are out there actively trying to change who are involved in regenerative agriculture.
Yes, so basically it's a process. Yeah, it definitely isn't something that we can do overnight.
Yeah.
Flo, do you have any super quick comments? If not, I'll go to the next question.
No, I just said we can't do it overnight, but we have to do it as fast as we can. Any steps that we can take in the right direction, take them as quickly as we can and as widespread as we can.
And we will continue to call out Monsanto and Co as degenerators. Don't get us wrong. We're not frightened to take them on, and we will, and we do.
And you have.
I have, exactly.
Yes, we need to speak out. So I'm actually just going to, we're at time. I am just going to say bye to everyone who needs to leave, but we can
still stay a bit longer. Yeah.
We can stay like 2 more minutes for the last 2 questions. Yeah. So for anyone who needs to leave, thank you so much for coming. It was great to see you all. And you can learn more about us. That's Sustainable Harvest International at www.sustainableharvest.org. We would love for you to donate if you can, if you just want to have more webinars like this, if you want to learn more about what we're doing, then just go to that same website, sustainableharvest.org/donate. Other than that, we will have more events like this that we want you to participate in. So we'll be letting you know about those now that you're on our email list. And we'll be letting you know about the film that Flo is featured in, along with 3 of our wonderful farmers. So we're really excited for that. The trailer will be showed soon. And then from there, we will be hosting screenings. So we'll be inviting people to also host their own screenings. If that's something that may interest you, please reach out. And the last thing that I will be mentioning about Sustainable Harvest is we are launching a tree program. It is something that has already been in the works for a while because we had a pilot project, but now we're making it even bigger and better. And so this is perfect that we're here with Andre today because, we're talking about what that scale looks like. And so we're actually doing that as well as Sustainable Harvest. And we're doing that thanks to organizations that are helping us, like Regeneration International. So really is not just us, it's all our partners as well. And we're just glad that we can talk more about that today. So I did just want to say that for everyone who needs to leave. It looks like a lot of people want to stay though. So we'll just maybe get into the last 2 questions and then of course we'll close out. So the next question is from Brian. And I think we already touched on this, but I'm going to ask it anyway because you might have one more comment, Andre. Are there good examples of doing regenerative agriculture at scale, like large land plots, or is it a practice that is best suited to small scales? He also said thanks to Flo and Andre and the organizers for this excellent discussion. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah, there's lots of examples at scale all through the Midwest. We can see farms with thousands of acres using cover crops now. Then when we start talking about regenerative grazing systems such as holistic planned grazing, there's over 100 million acres under this regenerative system on every arable continent, to give you an example. And then there are other, what we call other regenerative grazing systems that have been inspired by the savory system. So we're talking many hundreds of millions of acres already, and we're regenerating these degenerated landscapes through it. Another really good one for us, one of our big projects is the Billion Agave project in Mexico, where we're working with agaves and mesquite, and essentially using the agave leaves, which before were never eaten because a lot of plants put out compounds to protect themselves from being eaten, lectins, saponins, tannins, and so on. But by chopping it up and fermenting it and turning it into silage, all those break the organisms break it down. Now they become a very, very healthy food. And this is a game changer for the people in that area, because now they've got a really good palatable food in the dry season instead of eating out the grass and degrading the landscape. And also the animals, losing fitness by not having grass in the dry periods. Now they can be really healthy. You can take them off pasture, they keep their condition, the pasture can regenerate. There's then we actually start talking about the agroforestry systems. Now we're doing at scale, hundreds of acres. So we can do it at every scale from, like I said, 3 acres, if you did in back garden, with these systems, through to grazing properties, ranches that are hundreds of thousands of acres. We have a system. That's the beauty of this. There's nowhere on the planet we can't do it, apart from Antarctica at the moment. And
Maybe
Greenland's probably not that good.
That's a great explanation.
Might,
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, essentially it can work wherever. You just need the manpower and the tools to do it. So yes, agreed.
And the money.
And the money. Yes, unfortunately. Well, that's why we like to ask for donations at these events, because we do need the money sometimes. But let's move on to the last question. There is another question after that, but Catherine,
Yeah, I've got the time. I don't have to go, so I'm happy to continue for a while.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, there is another question, but someone already answered it in the chat. So after this question, I'll actually just read the question and answer, and then thank you, Catherine, for answering that question already. So Hector's question that has not been answered is, what common challenges do smallholder farmers face when transitioning to regenerative agriculture, particularly when moving away from chemical inputs, and what strategies can help them overcome these obstacles? Would setting aside soil be a recommended strategy? So talking about that process, what are the challenges that farmers face when moving throughout that process, maybe especially towards the beginning?
Yeah, look, that is probably one of the most important questions. And this is where what you guys do in Sustainable Harvest International is so important, because the real strategy, real issues here, change management, how we rethink. Farmers are necessarily conservative, because if we do something wrong, we lose our crop. And if we've got too much debt, we lose our farm. And so you want to stick to what you know. And so moving out of it is very uncomfortable. And this is the time when we need to support farmers with knowledge, with mentorship, and show them how to do it, and talk about an orderly transition. So the way I work with farmers, I run courses, I train farmers, is you don't change your farm overnight, because you don't want to set yourself up for failure. Whenever you go into something new, there are risks, there are things that don't work out. So select just a small part of your land. Don't get the worst part, because you don't want to set yourself up for failure. Don't get the best part, because you don't want to make it too easy either. And start working on it with the new system. And what will happen is you learn from it. Probably the first year you do it, it doesn't quite work out like you think you would. So you haven't lost anything, but what you've gained now is knowledge. You can think through, okay, why didn't it work? What can I do better? And then the next year you do it again. And at some point, each year you revise it, you look at it, and when you're happy with it, then you can start an orderly transition to the whole farm and scale it up as you can afford it over time. And each year you do the same thing again. You sit down and you go, what didn't work so well? What can I do better? How can I improve it? So you change your mindset, and you go from, I suppose, farming by a recipe to now you are your own researcher. You are the person who's being innovative, and it actually changes as a farmer. Instead of being a laborer on your farm, you now feel like you're inspired. You've got hope. You think about next year it's going to be so, I can do this, and you start really looking forward to it. It's a whole game changer in the way we feel as farmers. I'm 70. I'm still farming, not because I have to, because I love it, and I'm just always looking forward to the new things I'm doing. Farming then becomes one of the most wonderful things that you can do by changing this process.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Andre. I think that was a perfect way for you to close out, just kind of bringing it back to why you do this as well. Because as a reminder to everyone, Andre is not just someone who is talking about this, he does it by himself as well. You can kind of see behind him on his screen, his beautiful land and farm. So yes, just thank you so much. And Flo, I want to let you give final comments before I close this out.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I just want to agree with everything that Andre has said, and point out that I think this is why it's so important for farmers to have the opportunity to learn from others. I think some farmers can seek out that opportunity by seeking out their neighbors, connecting with other farmers online or in ways like that. A lot of those 500 million smallholder farmers around the world, it's not so easy for them to go online or to get to a farm that is using regenerative practices to see how it works and to ask for assistance getting through the difficult patches. And so for those farmers, I think that's why it's just so important that there's programs like Sustainable Harvests out there, and that we're able to do more, and that more organizations also take on this role of sharing that knowledge. And one of my other favorite farmers, in addition to Andre and all of the SHI farmers, is Elliot Coleman here in Maine. And Elliot's, I think, 85. So he's got even you beat, Andre. And he also he's turned over most of the farming to some younger people, but he's still doing it, he says, because he really wants to keep experimenting and keep trying new things and doing better and doing more, especially with cover crops these days. And his favorite saying of mine, it probably wasn't his originally, but I think of him when I hear it, is that knowledge is like manure. It's only helpful when you spread it around. And so I think, that's what
So
Sustainable
Elliot
Harvest is doing. That's what Regeneration International is doing. And really grateful to everybody who's here, being part of that as you take in this knowledge today and share your own thoughts and continue to spread it around. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre, Flo, again. And the question I mentioned that it was already answered in the chat, I'll just quickly wrap it up with that. Claudia asked, so does increasing and improving the microbiome of soil health reduce carbon? And because Catherine Gunling is an amazing board member, we are so lucky to have her. She answered the question in the chat. So I'm just going to read her answer. And that is that, yes, it does. If we increase the microbiome of soil health, it does reduce carbon because let's see, healthy plants sink much more carbon than lifeless dirt. The balance of different soil organisms, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, etc., or microbiome varies by plant and can be optimized through natural means. So regenerative methodologies maximize the ability of soil organisms to interact with each other and plants, which is good for all of us. Essentially, when nature is working, then things actually get absorbed into the soil. And as Andre mentioned, degenerative practices do not allow that to happen. So that is why regenerative practices help with climate change as well. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you all for amazing questions, for staying a little bit later. I can see everyone is eager to hear more because you're all still here. So there will be more. We have more events planned like this. And have an amazing evening, day, whatever time it is where you are. And we'll see you at the next event. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao, everybody.
Good to
Adios.
see you.